I should have been asleep. It was almost 2 in the morning, and I'd been sitting on the living room couch for hours, staring at the dark TV screen like it might start playing answers. I wasn't even angry at first. Not exactly. More like numb. The kind of numb that only shows up after you've ignored your instincts for so long they stop whispering and start screaming. The front door finally clicked. The lock turned, slow and deliberate. I sat up straight, the muscles in my neck stiff from holding tension too long. She walked in. Ellis. She looked like the closing scene of a movie she forgot to tell me she was starring in. Red dress, tight, short, elegant in the way that was meant to be noticed. Her makeup was still mostly intact, but her lipstick had faded in that careless way that doesn't come from dinner. Comes from being somewhere you shouldn't have been. From being touched. And then there was the cologne. Not hers. Not mine. Something heavier, masculine, expensive. I could smell it from across the room when she passed me without saying a word. She didn't flinch when she saw me sitting there, awake and waiting. Just turned on the light, took a slow breath, and walked toward the entryway table where she usually kept her charger. She reached into her purse, moving with the mechanical calm of someone pretending nothing was off. But her rhythm stalled when she realized her phone wasn't where she'd left it. It was already in my hand. Unlocked. I hadn't gone looking for anything. I didn't have to. Her phone had buzzed twice around 1:30 a.m. The screen lit up with a name I'd seen before. Mark from the office. The message preview was short, but it felt like a punch to the chest. You drive me crazy. Same dress tomorrow? That was all it said. But that was more than enough. I handed the phone to her without a word. My hand was steady, but everything inside me was fraying at the edges. She took it slowly, didn't even look surprised. Her eyes flicked down to the screen, then back up to me, and that's when she started. "You're going through my phone now?" she said, her voice cool and sharp, like I just confessed to some major crime. I didn't respond. I just stared. Wow, Jake. Seriously? That's a complete invasion of privacy. What were you even doing? Sitting here waiting to ambush me like some stalker? Her voice was rising now, not shaking, not stammering, not explaining, just attacking. "You had no right to do that," she snapped. "None. You don't just go through someone's phone like that. That's toxic." Still, I said nothing. She folded her arms, phone still in hand, face tightening into a practiced look I'd seen before. Righteous indignation. She wasn't panicking. She was performing. "You know what?" she went on. This is exactly why I don't tell you things. Because you flip out over nothing. You think everything's some kind of scandal when really, it's just work. It's always just work. I wanted to ask, does Mark from the office always text you after midnight about your dress? But I didn't. I just watched her twist herself into a victim so fast it made my head spin. She kept going. "I'm allowed to have a life, Jake. I'm allowed to go out without being interrogated. This is controlling. You're spying on me." No denial. No, that message was taken out of context. "No, I'm sorry this looks bad." Just the script. The one she'd clearly rehearsed in her head for weeks, maybe months. "It was just a message," she said, shrugging. "You're reading into it. God, I can't even imagine what kind of story you've built in your head. You've been sitting here all night, obsessing, haven't you?" My jaw clenched and I looked away, not because she was right, but because I knew, deep down, this wasn't the beginning of anything. It was the middle of something I'd been refusing to face. Ellis stepped out of her heels like she was home from a long shift, like this was normal, like her husband waiting up for her at 2 a.m. Holding her phone, reading that message, was just some annoying inconvenience she had to get through before bed. "I'm not doing this tonight," she said with a dismissive wave. "If you want to talk, we can talk tomorrow, when you've calmed down and stopped acting like a damn detective." I could feel my heart beating in my ears. Not fast, not panicked, just loud. Like my body was trying to remind me. "You knew." I stood up, quiet, measured. No yelling, no confrontation. She paused, watching me walk toward the hallway. "That's it?" she asked, a mocking note in her voice. No apology for invading my privacy? I stopped at the threshold of the guest room, the door already cracked open. The air inside was colder, bare, untouched, like a room that had been waiting for me. No, I said, turning my head just enough to look at her over my shoulder. I think you owe the apologies tonight, but I know I won't get them. She scoffed, but didn't follow, didn't try to explain, didn't even ask what I was thinking. And that told me everything I needed to know. When I lay down on the old fold-out mattress, my body sinking into springs that creaked with every breath, the silence finally wrapped around me like a blanket. I stared at the ceiling, at the pattern of faint shadows cast by the street lamp outside, and thought about how strange it is. The moment when something breaks. Not loud, not sudden, just a quiet snap like a thread giving way after holding too much weight for too long. I didn't cry, didn't rage. I just started remembering. Small things, moments I'd shrugged off, warnings I'd chosen to ignore because I didn't want to be that guy, the paranoid one, the jealous husband, the insecure mess. I thought about how, 2 months ago, Ellis had joked on the phone with a friend about how some husbands were too easy, said you could train them with the right look, like a dog who only needed a raised eyebrow to roll over. I remembered laughing at the time, thinking she was just being sarcastic. But now it felt like a confession I hadn't recognized. I pulled the blanket over my chest and turned my face toward the wall. My eyes were wide open, but I wasn't seeing anything. She had come home in a red dress, smelling like someone else. And somehow I was the one apologizing, for caring, for noticing, for not being numb enough to ignore it. That was her talent. Not lying, not cheating, not even hiding it. Just flipping the script so fast, so smoothly, that you start to wonder if you're the one who broke the rules. But I wasn't wondering anymore. I was done wondering. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I laid there in the guest room, staring up at the ceiling like it held some kind of answer, some forgotten truth hidden in the drywall. But the only thing up there was silence. Silence, and memories that wouldn't leave me alone. At first, they came slowly, like raindrops before a storm. A strange tone in her voice here, an excuse that didn't quite land there. But then, once the dam cracked, the whole timeline came flooding in. There had been signs. So many signs. Things I brushed off as stress, coincidence, or worse. My own insecurity. Now, I realized they were all red flags waving right in front of me, and I closed my eyes and walked straight into them. Like that dinner we had 2 months ago. She'd spent hours getting ready for a work event. Her words, not mine. But it wasn't the event that stuck with me, it was how she acted after. We had sat down at our favorite sushi place around 9. A last-minute dinner she said she squeezed in for me. She looked perfect. Effortless hair. Full makeup. That signature perfume she only wore when she wanted attention. She barely touched her food. I remember that. She picked at her roll like she was going through the motions. Halfway through dinner, she got a call. Didn't answer it, but she looked at the screen a little too long. I asked, casually, "Who was that?" She shrugged. "Just someone from the office. I'll call them back later." I didn't press. I didn't even think to. Why would I? She'd built this version of herself over years. The reliable one, the career woman, the one who told me I was lucky to have someone so low maintenance. But something about the way she guarded her phone that night, it stuck with me even then. I just didn't know why. Looking back now, the picture is clearer than I want it to be. There was that week in July when she suddenly started going out more. Networking events, she called them. Different outfits, new makeup, even a gym membership she barely used. She'd come home late, smelling like mint and wine and a hint of something I couldn't place. Until now. Cologne. Aftershave. Men. She'd always been private, but something shifted. Her phone, once left in the open on the kitchen counter, suddenly became an extension of her hand. If she wasn't holding it, it was face down, silent. I didn't even realize how much that changed until I found myself flinching every time it buzzed. I chalked it up to work stress. Her job was demanding, high pressure. She was always saying things like, "Clients don't respect boundaries," and "corporate life doesn't sleep." So when she started staying late more often, I bought the story. Hook. line and sinker. She even got clever with it. Some nights she'd come home and sit on the couch with me, curling into my side like she used to. She'd tell me about difficult meetings or office drama with names I didn't recognize: Mark, Lila, someone named Theo. Names that floated around like background noise. Convenient noise. She told just enough truth to keep me from questioning the rest. I remember one night in particular. She was tipsy, but in that polished way she carried herself when she wanted to pretend she was fine. She came home in a black dress and heels, the kind of outfit that makes people look twice. I asked how the night was. She smiled, leaned over, and kissed my cheek. Good. Long. I'm just glad to be home. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced down, her eyes flickering just for a second before she hit the lock button and slid it under a throw pillow like it was nothing. It wasn't nothing. She said she was tired and headed up to bed. I stayed downstairs, sipping the whiskey I hadn't planned on drinking. And that's when the doubt crept in, not loud, not accusatory. Just a whisper: "You don't know her like you used to." I buried that whisper for weeks. Told myself we were just in a rough patch. That all couples went through this kind of thing. That I had no right to feel suspicious without proof. That I was being paranoid. But here's the thing about instincts: they don't need proof. They just need time. And eventually they stop whispering. They start screaming. I remember another detail now, something that seemed meaningless at the time. She started turning off the read receipts on her messages. Said it was because her clients kept accusing her of ignoring them. But the truth? She didn't want me seeing when she read my texts, because she didn't want me knowing she was ignoring me too. She also got really into privacy settings. Changed all her social media passwords. Logged out of shared devices. At one point, she told me it was because she was protecting client data. Which, yeah, sounded reasonable, but looking back, that wasn't about clients. That was about me. That was about walls. I didn't just miss the signs. I helped paint over them. I made excuses for her. I defended her to my friends when they started asking why she never came around anymore. Why she seemed distant. Why I looked tired all the time. Ellis is just slammed at work, I'd say. She's *ling it. I don't want to distract her. I even started blaming myself. Maybe I wasn't being supportive enough. Maybe I wasn't exciting anymore. I'd been wearing the same hoodies, going to the same job, cooking the same meals. Maybe she needed space, and I was suffocating her without realizing it. But then I remembered something else. About a year ago, we were at a friend's birthday. She got tipsy and leaned in to whisper something to me that I laughed off at the time. She said, "You know what I love about you, Jake? You're predictable. That's your superpower." I thought she meant it as a compliment. Now I realize it was a warning. She knew I wouldn't look too closely, that I trusted her, that I'd always be where she left me. I was the safe choice, which made me the easiest one to deceive. Maybe that's the part that hurt the most. Not the message, not the red dress, not the fact that I had visual confirmation of something I still couldn't say out loud. It was that I'd made it so easy for her. I handed her trust like a blank check. Never once considered she'd cash it somewhere else. And now I was lying in the guest room, in the house I paid for, in the life I helped build, feeling like a guest in both. The distance between us wasn't new. It had just stopped pretending to be subtle. It had grown roots. I rolled over, pressed my face into the pillow, and exhaled through clenched teeth. I wanted to be wrong. God, I wanted there to be some innocent explanation I hadn't thought of. That Mark from the office was actually short for marketing team, or that the message was some kind of inside joke. But no one sends inside jokes like "you drive me crazy." Same dress tomorrow? Not at 2 in the morning. Not after coming home in that same red dress. Not when she looks at you like you're the one who just broke trust. No, this wasn't paranoia. This was clarity. And once it arrives, you can't unsee it. Friday came like a test I hadn't studied for. Ellis had been quiet the past few days, careful, even. No fights, no snark. Just that polite distance, like I was someone she used to know but didn't quite trust anymore. The woman I married had been replaced by someone who rehearsed her lines and triple-checked her phone's lock screen. Someone who smiled like a stranger. And I was done pretending not to notice. That morning, Over burnt toast and black coffee, she said. I might be home late. Girls' night. I didn't look up. Where? Ally's place, she said. She's back from Chicago for the weekend. That was the first mistake. Ally hadn't lived in the state for months. She'd moved for work back in June. I remembered because Ellis had cried after the going-away brunch. She made a whole post about it. Said it felt like the end of an era. So no, Ally wasn't hosting anything. But I didn't challenge her. Didn't flinch. Didn't react. Just said, cool. Have fun. She didn't even blink. Just nodded, tossed her dishes in the sink, and left for work like it was any other Friday. But something about the way she shut the door, it felt like punctuation. Not a period. Not an exclamation point. Something colder. Something final. I waited 2 hours. Then I opened my laptop. There's a folder on our desktop labeled Home Projects. It's supposed to be for receipts and measurements, things like light fixtures and sofa dimensions. But she'd once used it to upload a hotel confirmation, probably by accident. I never said anything. At the time, I convinced myself it was old. A leftover from a work retreat or something innocent. But I hadn't deleted it. And now I opened that folder again like I was opening a wound. The reservation was still there. A hotel downtown. Mid-range, boutique style. The kind of place you don't go unless you're trying to impress someone or avoid being recognized. It wasn't even under her name. It was under his, Mark. There was no last name on the booking, just an email that ended in a corporate domain. But I knew. Every detail lined up. The timing, the tone, the dress, the message. This wasn't speculation anymore. So I got in the car and drove. The sky was already turning that hazy shade of gold that tricks you into thinking the day still has time left. But I wasn't chasing time anymore. I was chasing certainty. I didn't go straight to the hotel. First, I stopped at a bar across the street. One of those dark little corners with stiff drinks and no questions. I ordered something forgettable, left it untouched, and found a table by the window. From there, I could see the entrance. And I waited. The minutes dragged like hours, each one chipping away at the part of me that still wanted to believe this was all a misunderstanding. That maybe she'd show up with a group of girls, laughing and holding takeout, and I'd realize how paranoid I'd become. But that's not what happened. 40 minutes later, I saw her. Ellis stepped out of a cab, heels first, one leg at a time like it was a runway. The red dress again. The same one from the other night. It clung to her like it belonged to someone else. Someone who wasn't married. Someone who didn't care about being recognized. She didn't look around. Didn't check for anyone watching. She just walked straight through the lobby doors. And Mark was already there, waiting. He wore a dark blazer and that effortless confidence that only comes from knowing you're wanted. He leaned in and kissed her cheek. Then her mouth. They smiled like this was routine, like this was theirs. Then they walked to the elevators hand in hand. I didn't move, didn't speak. I just took out my phone and recorded. Not for revenge. Not even for proof anymore. I already knew. But I needed something to hold in my hand when the doubt came creeping back. Something to remind me that no, I hadn't imagined this. That I hadn't made it all up to avoid confronting something broken inside me. 2 minutes. That's all I recorded. Then I stood, left a 20 on the table, and walked out into the cold air like I had somewhere better to be. But I didn't go home. Not yet. Instead, I drove aimlessly, no music, no destination. Just the hum of the tires on asphalt and the silent chorus of thoughts I couldn't shut off. I thought about our wedding day. She wore flats under her dress because she said she didn't want to trip. Said she wanted to dance without pain. I thought it was sweet. Thought it meant she was practical, grounded. That she was someone who chose comfort over flash. Someone who chose me. I thought about our first apartment. The way she painted the walls a muted green and told me it made the space feel calm. How she'd leave notes in my lunchbox. Little jokes or one-line compliments. I kept some of them in my desk drawer for years. I thought about how far we'd come from those moments. And how fast she'd run in the other direction. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the sun had set. The house was quiet. Still. like it didn't know whose side it was on anymore. I walked in, dropped my keys on the counter, and sat at the kitchen table for what felt like hours. The video played in my mind over and over, not even needing the screen. I could see every detail, her posture, his hand, the way they moved like no one else existed. Eventually, I took a breath, a deep one, and I knew this wasn't just betrayal. This was premeditated, practiced, built on months of deception and routine. She hadn't slipped. She hadn't stumbled. She'd walked into it with open eyes and steady heels. It's strange how clarity works. You spend months spiraling, second-guessing, drowning in subtle cues and maybe this and maybe not. But then something breaks, something undeniable, and everything that felt foggy suddenly sharpens into shape. This was that moment. The air in the room changed. My shoulders dropped, and my pulse slowed. Not from peace, from decision. I stood, went to the closet, and grabbed the spare duffel bag I kept from my college days. It smelled like dust and old travel. I packed a few essentials. Nothing emotional, nothing shared, just enough to get by. Then I pulled out the black binder I'd tucked behind the bookshelf, the one with the house deed, the business license, and all the paperwork I thought I'd never need. I laid it out on the table, one page at a time. This house, mine, purchased through my company 3 years before we got married. Every renovation, every appliance, every contract under Dawson House Holdings. My LLC. She'd signed the rental agreement during tax season. Said she didn't care what the paperwork said as long as it was simple. She never asked again, and I never corrected her. Now I was thankful I hadn't. The bed we slept in, bought under a business expense for staging. The couch, leased. The dining table, technically company property. The only thing she ever truly owned in this house was her phone, and maybe a drawer full of clothes. I wasn't being petty. I was being clear. The trust was gone. The bond? Shattered. All that was left now was clean lines and quiet exits. No drama. No confrontation. Just truth. I wrote a note. 5 words. You didn't expect it, but you knew. Then I placed it on the kitchen counter, right where the phone charger used to be. That night, I didn't sleep in the guest room. I didn't sleep at all. But for the first time in weeks, my heart felt still. Not healed. Not yet. But still. I didn't expect peace to feel so clinical. But that's exactly what it felt like the next morning. Like a checklist being calmly executed in a room with no windows. No wind. No chaos. Just clean, sharp decisions. Ellis didn't come home that night. I hadn't expected her to. And that made things easier. I was up before sunrise, packing what was left of my essentials. Not much, just the things that weren't tied to a memory. Clothes I didn't associate with anniversaries. A toothbrush from the downstairs bathroom. My laptop. The spare key from the junk drawer. The house was still. Almost too still. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the soft creak of the hallway floor. Everything familiar, but none of it comforting. The rooms felt like a set, like the illusion of a life rather than the life itself. I left the note on the kitchen island, right where her charger used to sit, and stood there for a moment, staring at it like it might suddenly say more than I had written. You didn't expect it, but you knew. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't a threat. It was a fact, because she did know. Every time she silenced her phone, every time she left in that red dress, every time she blamed me for noticing, she knew, and I had finally stopped pretending I didn't. By the time I locked the front door behind me, the sun had just begun to rise. Pale light slipped over the rooftops, stretching long shadows across the driveway. I slid the key into the lockbox and snapped it shut. That lockbox had been meant for emergencies, plumbers, dog sitters, Amazon packages when we weren't home. Now it was part of something bigger. Operation Spare Key. A plan I hadn't even realized I was forming until it started unfolding on its own. I drove to a storage facility on the edge of town. Clean, quiet, climate-controlled. I'd signed the lease a month earlier under Dawson House Holdings, back when I still believed I was just being financially organized. But some part of me must have known I'd need the distance. The backup plan. Inside the unit, There was a couch, a mini fridge, a couple of labeled boxes, and a folded document organizer I'd kept for emergencies. Receipts, statements, itemized inventories. My lawyer had once said, keep everything clean, keep everything dated. Assume everything will one day need to be proven. I had taken that advice to heart. That afternoon, I met with a moving crew. 3 guys, fast, polite, didn't ask questions. I gave them the code to the lockbox and directions. I told them what to take and what to leave. I even labeled it out. Green tags meant remove, red tags meant leave. Every green tag was placed on something we bought together, but that I had paid for. Every red tag was stuck to items that were hers by purchase or by sentiment. I didn't want anything that might look like revenge. I just wanted to keep what was already mine. The furniture went into a new storage unit under a short-term lease. The electronics were photographed and inventoried. The kitchenware, boxed and sorted. My crew had it down to a science. By the time they were done, the house looked like a model home. Staged, soulless, and echoing. I didn't go back inside. I stood in the driveway, watched them close the truck doors, and then I left. No second thoughts. No goodbyes. Later that night, around 9:47 p.m., I got the first message. Ellis, where is everything? No greeting. No Jake. Just confusion. Or panic. I could almost hear the sound of her heels clicking across the hardwood, echoing in a house she no longer recognized. I didn't respond. 5 minutes later, another one. Ellis, what the hell is going on? Then a call. I watched it ring twice and let it die. The third message. Ellis, if this is some kind of punishment, it's messed up. I didn't reply, because it wasn't a punishment. It was a reveal. The truth is, she had spent months removing herself from our marriage. Inch by inch, glance by glance, excuse by excuse. I had simply finished the job she started. I had cut the final thread. By the next morning, she had left 7 messages. Only the last one contained a question that mattered. Ellis, did you take the deed? I read it, then read it again, and I smiled bitterly, because that was the moment she realized she hadn't been living in our house. She'd been living in mine. A few hours later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. When I checked it, a polite voice said, "Hello, Mr. Dawson. This is Melissa at the county clerk's office. Ms. Ellis Thompson came in today to request property records. We explained that Dawson House Holdings remains the listed owner. Just wanted to confirm that no ownership changes have been filed recently. Let us know if there's anything you need from our end." I saved the message, not out of spite but for the record, because everything from this point forward was about precision, clarity, paper trails. That afternoon, I logged into the bank and initiated the account restructure. Our joint checking? Closed. A new account created under my company name, linked to a business trust. Her cards were already flagged as inactive. The system sent out polite notices. Nothing harsh, just cold, professional redirections. 2 hours later, I got another message. Ellis, my card just declined. Twice. I stared at the message for a while. Then I archived it. Let the silence answer for me. Around 6 p.m. My phone buzzed again. Not her this time. A friend of hers. One I barely knew. "Hi, Jake. I'm not sure what's going on, but Ellis is really upset. She said you emptied the house and froze her accounts. I feel weird being involved, but I'm just checking in." I didn't reply, but I did block the number. The way I saw it, if Ellis had friends she could cry to, then she could start there. She didn't need me to play the villain and the therapist. She wanted distance. Now she had it. The next evening, I stopped by the property one last time, just to change the locks. I parked around the corner and waited until the porch light flipped off. I knew her routine. Knew she wouldn't be home for another hour, assuming she'd even come back after the last 2 days. The locksmith worked fast. 15 minutes. New locks. New codes. Fresh start. I tipped him extra and handed him a manila envelope before he left. Inside was a document Ellis had signed years ago, Just another page in a stack of boring tax paperwork, she'd once called it. A rental agreement between her and Dawson House Holdings. Her signature at the bottom. Dated. Witnessed. Filed. She had never owned a square foot of that home. Not once. I stood on the porch for a moment, breathing in the sharp night air. The house behind me looked bigger somehow, emptier, yes, but bigger, like it had finally exhaled. Like it had been holding its breath through every argument, every fake apology, every night she came home smelling like someone else. And now it was free. So was I. I turned the new key in the lock, shut the door behind me, and left the porch light off. There was nothing left to illuminate. The next phase didn't begin with a slam or a scream. It began with a ping. Monday morning, 8:13 a.m. My phone buzzed. It was a fraud alert. Or at least that's what she thought it was. Ellis had tried to use the joint credit card twice, apparently. First for gas, then for a latte. Both declined. The alert popped up automatically, and I just stared at it for a minute. Not out of hesitation, but out of something closer to fascination. The machine didn't care about heartbreak. It didn't know about betrayal. It just followed the instructions I had quietly put in place weeks ago. I tapped no action needed and moved on with my day. That was the moment the fallout really began. At 9:02 a.m. she texted, "Ellis, are our cards down? I tried to pay and it got declined. Some fraud thing?" I left it unread. At 9:15, she called. I silenced it. By 9:28, she tried again. "Ellis, seriously, what's going on?" Still nothing. I was at a co-working space downtown. One of those quiet, converted lofts with brick walls and people in noise-canceling headphones. My laptop screen glowed with spreadsheets, documents, transfer logs. The quiet hum of consequences. Over the last week, I had already moved the bulk of my funds into a separate business account. Tied to Dawson House Holdings. Tied to me. Our old joint accounts had been joint in name only. I had opened them, I had funded them, I had controlled access. She never thought to question it. She never thought I'd close the gates. At 10:07 a.m. she tried the debit card again, this time for an Uber. Failed. I watched it happen in real time. The banking app tracked each attempt, each decline, each notification. And then, at 10:12, came the message I'd been waiting for. "Ellis, are you doing this on purpose?" I didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, I picked up my phone and called the leasing office for her car. It had been registered under my business name as a company expense. Another detail she hadn't bothered remembering. I was polite, professional. "Hi, I'd like to remove a vehicle from our fleet. I'll be transferring the title and responsibility. No renewal, just closure." They didn't ask questions. It wasn't their business. At 11:30, she sent a longer message. "Ellis, this is insane. I can't pay for anything. I just tried to use my personal card and even that declined. Did you touch that too? Because if you're freezing everything, we need to talk. You can't just do this." That was when I finally replied. "Me, your personal card has always been in your name, but the account behind it was funded by the business. And that business is mine." 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Then a reply. "Ellis, you're seriously we*p*nizing money now? After everything?" I didn't answer that, because I wasn't we*p*nizing anything. I was severing ties, cleaning up, making sure I didn't get dragged into her spiral. She had treated our relationship like a disposable thing. Now she could live with disposable access. Around 2 p.m. I got an email from our shared bank. Ellis had tried to dispute the account changes. The message was short and direct. "Hello, Mr. Dawson. A user associated with your former joint account has requested ownership clarification. As you are the primary on all accounts involved and the linked EIN is tied exclusively to Dawson House Holdings, we've denied the change request. No further action needed unless you object." I didn't object, but I did download a copy of the statement. Because if this ever went to court, I'd want the timeline tight. That evening, I heard from her again. This time, in voicemail form. She hadn't called all day, which I found interesting. But the message she left at 6:42 p.m. made everything clear. Her voice started out tight, angry, but there was something else layered beneath it. Something new. Panic. Jake, I don't know what your endgame is here, but this is childish. I can't even pay my rent. I just talked to the leasing office and they said the property is owned by your company? Are you serious? Since when? She paused. Deep breath. Then, you made me sign that lease without even explaining it. You said it was just tax stuff. I didn't know it meant the house wasn't mine. Silence. Then one final line. I need to talk to you. Please. I played it twice, then deleted it. Not out of cruelty, just out of clarity. The truth was, she had always seen ownership as proximity. If she was living in something, using it, enjoying it, then it was hers. But paperwork didn't lie. And the lease she signed, the one I had carefully drawn up and filed, was rock solid. The house wasn't hers. The accounts weren't hers. The car wasn't hers. She had built her castle on sand, and the tide had finally come in. The next day, she went to the municipal records office. I knew this because a clerk there left me a voicemail. Standard protocol when someone requests ownership history on a property tied to an LLC. Hi, Mr. Dawson. This is Melanie from the county assessor's office. Ms. Thompson came in to review ownership records for your property on Kingswell Drive. We showed her the documents indicating the owner is Dawson House Holdings. Just wanted to confirm you're aware. I called her back just to be polite. Thanks for the heads up, I said. Yes, I'm aware. Please feel free to send her a copy of the lease if she needs it for her records. She chuckled softly. Already did. She wasn't thrilled. I hung up and leaned back in the chair of my modest new apartment. A one-bedroom, wood floors, neutral walls, no pretense, just space. Space to rebuild without the shadow of someone who had learned to twist guilt into a tool. That night, Ellis tried one last time. Another message. Ellis, you made your point, but you're punishing me more than I deserve. I know I hurt you, but this isn't the way. You're better than this. I stared at that line for a long time. Better than what? Better than removing access she had never truly earned? Better than protecting myself from further damage? Because she wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was asking for access. And those two things weren't the same. I typed one sentence and hit send. Me, actions have consequences. You made yours. Now I'm living mine. Nothing after that. Just silence. And I realized, as I closed my phone and looked around at the place I now called home, there was a strange peace in being unreachable. In not having to defend the decisions I made in order to survive. She thought I'd yell. Thought I'd grovel or spiral. But I hadn't done either. I had simply planned. Quietly. Methodically. And then, when it was time, I acted. Now it was her turn to feel the distance she had created. Not out of vengeance, but out of truth. Because the life she tried to keep on borrowed credit with borrowed trust was no longer available. And the keys? They didn't fit anymore. She tried to find me. Not out of love, out of desperation. Mutual friends. Social media. Even old co-workers. But I was gone. Different city. New apartment. Fresh name on the mailbox. My number hadn't changed, but silence was my answer. I had nothing left to give her. When she finally tracked me down, bursting into my office without an appointment, she made a scene. Demanding explanations. Crying. Accusing. But I just looked at her and said, I don't accept walk-ins. Especially not from strangers. She froze. People stared. That mattered to her. Image always did. She stormed out, designer bag on her shoulder. Bought on credit. Not love. No ring. No keys. No audience left to clap for her. Meanwhile, I walked my rescue dog, paid rent on time, and brewed coffee in silence. Peace, it turned out, was louder than I expected. And I was finally learning to listen. A month later, I sent her a letter. No return address. No threats. No nostalgia. Just one sentence, handwritten on thick, white paper. When a home becomes a punishment, the smartest move is to build a new one. I knew she'd read it twice. First in sarcasm, then in fear. But it didn't matter. I wasn't writing for her comfort. I was writing for the echo. The clean silence that came after a chapter closes the right way. I didn't live in luxury. I lived in quiet. A couch that didn't match, a dog that didn't judge, and a life that didn't ask for explanations. No ultimatums. No secrets. Just peace and a door that locked from the inside. Somewhere across town, a woman sat in a room too expensive and too small, holding a bag that couldn't carry what she'd lost. And that, finally, was enough.